you have seating for the families? Because the families should be up at front. They also should have been in the circle when you guys were singing and praying. So I don't know if you want to, like, this is for the families. Is there seating for the families? It's open seating. Okay, we should have seating for the families.
Gotcha. Ask them to identify themselves. They will put up their hands.
So there is still quite a bit of seating here that's available for any people who would like to take a seat, family members. So if any families are interested, there are a number of seats that are available here inside that you're welcome to come and occupy. And if there's not enough, I'm sure other members of Parliament will gladly give up their seats. Yes. So any MMIWG families are welcome to come inside the tent. There is plenty of seats available. Women who are pregnant. Because the ceremony may be quite a long one. Elders are also, I request that you come take a seat. This ceremony press conference might be an extended press conference. For any elders, there is actually still a number of seats available if anyone would like to come. Please do not be shy. Get started? Nimakomakantik Tansei Nimiatane Atawapam Tikuk. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici et bienvenue à cette journée. Et j'aimerais juste encore inviter tout le monde à prendre le siège. j'aimerais faire le bienvenue à les familles des femmes disparues, assassinées, des femmes autochtones. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to ask everyone to just take their seats, and I'd also just like to also welcome all the family members from the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, and this is the reason we are here today. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here on Treaty 1 territory, and it is the homes and the homeland of the Dakota, Oji-Cree, Dene peoples. It is also the home of the Inuit who live here in Manitoba with us as well. It is the homeland of the Métis Nation. And we all live here together. No matter where you are from in the world, we all live here at the Forks. And I'm very pleased to be your Master of Ceremonies today. I am the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre. My name is Robert Falconet-Letts, for those of you who don't know who I am. But I'm just here to bear witness to this ceremony and to this announcement, and to have this opportunity of just working together to heal our communities and also to make sure that it never occurs again. If during this ceremony and this press conference, if you have issues, if you'd like to speak with someone, we do have 3 professional support workers who are available, and maybe they can raise their hand. We can find out where they are. They're at the back here. They're just waving. So there's a lady in yellow, a lady in brown, and a lady in white. And they're just at the back here by the cameras. So if you do wish to speak to someone, they will be available, and I'm sure they will come to find you if you see that you might be looking need some help. I have the honor and privilege of introducing our first speaker, Elder Linda St. Cyr. She is a very strong woman, and she will come offer some fine words. Elder St. Cyr.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be asked here to offer prayer today for such an important event. Will you please stand with me? God, our Creator, we praise you for this event and your purpose for it. We come to you with humble and grateful hearts for all you continually give us. We give you thanks for this day, for our health, and for our families, some of which are not complete due to some unfortunate circumstances. For these families, we ask for special blessings, for the safe return of loved ones, for healing, and for closure. Thank you for the opportunity to gather together and to support each other the best way we know how. Bless everyone here today and grant them peace. Amen.
Elder St. Cyr was with the Métis Nation. Thank you very much, Elder. I'd also now like to introduce Elders Nippenak, Clarence and Barbara Nippenak from Pine Creek First Nation, who will now come forward and offer thoughts and prayers and a blessing to each and every one of us. It's in my bag.
Well, why don't you go get it?
He's still learning, so be patient.
Okay. Prayed and blessed with.
Okay, just every drop. Miigwech, that is the protocol of our Anishinaabe people here, is when you want something to take place, especially a ceremony, you give tobacco. That's the proper way to do things. So just remember that, Robert, okay? Remember, that's how you start. That's how you start. It's never too late to learn. You know. My name is Barbara Nippenak. I'm a Thunderbird woman. And I'm Bear Clan. This is my husband, Clarence. And I'm here today to do the water ceremony for you because in my teachings, I grew up in a family of 9 girls, and my mother always used to say to us, One day you're going to be praying for those others and you're going to share this with others. So I stand before you here today, and as I mentioned to you, Minister, you listen, okay? Because it's our role as women to acknowledge the spirit of water. We are life givers. We bring life into this world, and we should cherish that. I acknowledge water because it is life. I pray in my language, and in my prayer, I'm going to ask for guidance and strength, and most of all, for families that are suffering, people that are homeless, children that are sick. I acknowledge that. And also, I pray for that water so that all people all over the world have access to clean drinking water. So I would encourage you, especially women, to take this water ceremony and pass it on. It is yours to keep and to share. Okay? I'll pray in my language now. Ani jobinesi kwendi gumakwa totem. Mema sema hagi mishimini guan, chimrahi gituan weni bekak chinenda ok manishima. Pematis wen sembrak. Metashia nongam kishamane tu eshapak sendmak, chishaweni migwong. Chikitemagi no egwong. A behan kokitapinon chiminane ka kusiot, Misiago Kashek Shinuat, Misiago Kagunchikiot, Misia Kitamagisot, Kichanishna Benanik, and Behavi Nangogawi Sagadeot and Guekagi. Nakani Guato Danasion, Tapinon Chimion, the question Simeon. But the shake in the Shipako Sandmark, Chisungite Ottomanong. Sanagatogashi Chigang Sanagat, Kawanin, Kichanishinabe, Tapinon Chim, Kini Hook. But the Shinonga Shamane to worship a sendaman. Men of a matis even to Sapantamon. Good thing he can in Niga name and Shina Bayang. Good thing he nate. He to win any garbage to woman. Good thing he can Niga name. But the Shinonga Shamane to worship a sendaman. And by when a begagachina and out, Manishma went out modest young when Jasamak. But the Shemi West and the Nonga Gizgak, Kichina and Mokani in my Skatuan city boyan. How big West get an acobin them, Nichanishina Bedok. And to all my relations, Miigwech, thank you for being here.
Igosene, Barbara and Clarence, thank you very much. I'd like now to ask Elder Boquet to come forward, and she will be conducting an Inuit ceremony. And maybe she can explain a little bit of what she will be doing and offer her prayers.
Good morning, beautiful morning. Before I start, I want to say thank you for the beautiful land I lived in right now, First Nations land and everybody's land. I want to, I'm going to let the kullik, traditional, our traditional kullik that kept us warm thousands and years ago. My mother kept me warm in a coldest days. And she dried my clothing after washing with this kullik, and I'll be saying a prayer for all those people who have lost their friends, daughters, and families. And to my own people, Inuit people, it's okay to be called Eskimo. I was called Eskimo. And that's who we are in Nunavut. And I'm from Nunavut, Baffin Island, and I live here in Winnipeg. So I'll say a prayer and let us remember the Inuit people who lives in the city everywhere and back home who have lost their families, and the people who walks around who have been murdering in this world. Thank you. I'll be saying my prayer in my own dialect. Let us stand up. Gutia tatavun kujanami, mana ulango yonk, unnualu kamagitia kaumigatigo. Kitungavut, taikualo, atane kaujimatia gatigo, kanuitula mangata inusitini. In taikua, tokutau simajuit, jaga simajuit, inuit, ipi inokotitin ikaumalugin, mana ulang. Kullamillo ikitiniatilunga atane ikayulauminga. Maana lokimatsimajavut. Kamagitsialaumikit ipinallinninganun ulitsimalaumikin. Jesusi atane pitjutigillogo. Amen. Thank you. I'll be letting the kullik.
Testing.
I don't have any matches. I only use a lighter. This kuluk needs a lot of patience. And our mother and our friends used to sit and beside it all day long and do cooking, making bannock, anything that was anything to do with this kuluk is so beautiful, but it needs a lot and lots of patience. This is how it kept us warm. Kuluk. The oil I'm using is from the store-bought because we used seal fat and whale blubber. So this is, and the wick is, we picked them from the land. I lost so much of my culture, but I had to relearn it. And it wasn't easy to relearn again about my culture, Inuit culture. Before I was taken away to go to residency school, I was only 4 years old before I was taken away. I remember the glimpse of my mother used to teach me how to do the wick and just roll it in my paw to make it soft. And I would be alone with her all the time. That's all I remember. Thank you. I will continue to do the lidding. Thank you so much.
Hey, hey.
Wow, thank you very much, Elder Boquette, Annie. That is absolutely beautiful. We all feel very calm. Next, I'd like to invite my colleague, Terry Duguid, to come forward. He is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Status of Women. I know it seems rather strange to have perhaps a man helping Marianne, but he does take good direction from Marianne Monsef, who's a strong leader, and he listens very well, so this is always good, men listening to women. And Terry, you know, is obviously a great colleague, also a proud supporter of the Moose Hide campaign. So Terry, if you could come say a few words.
Well, thank you, Rod. I know Robert. Robert. We call him RFO for short. So, well, thank you, Robert, for that kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I'd like to also acknowledge that we are here on Treaty 1 territory, the homeland of the Métis Nation, and I want to thank all of the elders for their beautiful prayers and starting us off in a good way. I don't know if Robert's Jerry Daniels was with us, Grand Chief, and he's at the back there. Welcome, Grand Chief of Southern Chiefs Organization, and Minister Eileen Clark. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome everyone to this beautiful place on this beautiful day. We're right near the Odina Circle, a special place where we meet on occasions like this, a sacred site here at the Forks, which has been witness to so much of our history and has been the meeting place for Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Aucune relation n'est plus importante pour notre gouvernement, ni pour le Canada, que notre relation avec le peuple autochtone. Le gouvernement du Canada reconnaît qu'à moins de reconnaître le passé, nous ne pouvons pas avant de l'avant et nous attaquer aux causes systémiques de la violence faite aux femmes, aux filles et aux personnes LGBTQ de S autochtones. Voilà pourquoi ma collègue, l'honorable Marianne Monsef, annonce un financement de plus de 13 millions de dollars pour plus de 100 initiatives de commémoration d'un océan à l'autre. And I am so pleased today to introduce my colleague and my friend, Marianne Monsef, who I've had the great privilege of serving as her parliamentary secretary for almost 3 years. It sounds like yesterday, and it's been a wonderful journey with you, Minister. The Honourable Marianne Monsef is Canada's Minister of International Development and Minister for Women and Gender Equality. Minister Monsef oversaw the transformation of Status of Women Canada from a small but mighty agency into a new, full ministry, the Department for Women and Gender Equality. She has obtained unprecedented funding for the fight for women's equality, to support new initiatives, including Canada's strategy to address and prevent gender-based violence, and the Women's Program, which supports the sustainability of women's organizations across Canada, and I've had the good fortune of announcing some of that funding here in Winnipeg. Minister Monsef has worked with cabinet colleagues to introduce gender-based budgeting and pay equity legislation, which has transformed the way we carry out our work as a federal government, and recently has helped shape the conversation on gender equality on the global stage at the G7 and the World Economic Forum. Minister Monsef has been a tireless advocate for gender equality in her community, across Canada and around the globe, and I am so pleased that she is here with us today for this important announcement. Please welcome the Honourable Marianne Monsef.
Thanks, guys. Bonjour, Anin, Tanshi, Salam Alaikum. I am so honored to be on this Treaty 1 territory in this tent surrounded by so many who have worked so hard to bring days like this about. And thank the many Indigenous peoples, including the Métis peoples, for allowing us to gather here today. I recognize that we are also near the sacred site of the burial site of Louis Riel. And I want to thank the elders, Barbara, Clarence, Annie, Linda, for ensuring that we begin in a good way, to begin with song, to begin with a fire that's kept going for us, to begin with another fire that teaches us an important part of Canada's story, and to begin with a prayer for water. We begin in a good way. And the monument that we are gathered around symbolizes and commemorates the loss of loved ones in this community. And I recognize that this place may be a painful place for many of you here today, and that we are at the intersection of the Red and Assiniboine rivers. I know that this place reminds us of tragic losses that your community suffered, that all of Canada has felt that pain with you. Tina Fontaine, Felicia Velvet Solomon, young women who were murdered more than a decade apart, but whose deaths have come to represent the heartbreak and the injustice of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls here in Canada, and of course right here in Manitoba. We honor their legacies and all those who are missing or have been taken because of gender-based violence, and we renew our commitment to work across different orders of government to make sure that this tragedy is no more. There are many Indigenous leaders in this room, and there's also representation from the government of Manitoba. Many thanks to Minister Clark for joining us here today. I do acknowledge that this has been a really important month for Canada, and that it's been a particularly important and painful month for the families and survivors of the tragedy that is missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, as well as Two-Spirit LGBTQ2+ loved ones. I do want to thank the Commissioner and the team that has supported them for their work and their commitment to this extremely difficult but necessary process. And I want to thank each one of you and all those around the country who've courageously shared your powerful testimonies with the Commission, and of course, by doing so with all of Canada. We recognize that it's painful to share these stories, and we thank you for your courage. And we want you to know that we are listening. We've heard about the consistent, systemic breaking of human rights. We've heard and we know that there are underlying causes of violence that leave Indigenous sisters particularly vulnerable. Those include sexism, racism, poverty, and the ongoing realities of colonialism and the devastation from the residential school system and the 60s scoop. It's unacceptable, and it must end. That's why we decided to conduct a review of the National Inquiry's final report, which the Prime Minister and Minister Bennett accepted in Gatineau on June 3rd. And we will be responding with our next steps in the weeks ahead. But know this, that work has been underway since day one of our government, and you have heard the Prime Minister make it clear that we will develop and implement a national action plan to end the violence against our stolen sisters and to prevent it from happening again. We've taken important steps to address the calls for action and for justice, including today's announcement. I'd like to take the opportunity that I have at the microphone today to talk about where we've been, what next steps we're going to take, and then invite to the front of the room a few leaders in this part of Canada to talk a little bit about how they and their communities will be part of the steps we take forward from here on. We have lifted more than half of the boiled water advisories. At least 35 communities whose challenges around drinking water were not recognized by iterations of governments past have now been added to the list to get clean drinking water. We've been working with victims' families to access up-to-date, accurate information on their loved ones through the Family Information Liaison Units, and working to provide cultural, emotional, and mental health supports for survivors and their loved ones. We are reviewing police practices and policies, and we are supporting a national office for investigative standards and practices at the RCMP. We've made other important steps. About $15 billion has been invested in funding programs for Indigenous peoples since we formed government. Close to $3 billion has been invested in elementary and secondary education, and among the first things we did was remove the 2% cap on post-secondary education. We've invested in First Nation Child and Family Services, about $1.5 billion, and I'm happy to say that our government House Leader was able to usher through 21 new laws on Friday before the House rose. These laws received royal assent from the Governor General. Among them were Bill C-91 and C-92, legislation to protect Indigenous languages and to respect them based on recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. And of course, the bill to address children in care and address this ongoing national travesty. We've approved more than 200,000 requests under Jordan's Principle for respite care, speech therapy, medical equipment, and mental health services. 171 health infrastructure projects have been completed. 42 are underway to build nursing stations, health centers, drug and alcohol treatment centers, Aboriginal Head Start on reserve facilities, and this is all happening in 153 First Nation communities. Over $1 billion has been invested in building new housing and repairing existing housing. And here in your province, over 1,400 units have been added to your housing stock. We put together Canada's first strategy to address and prevent gender-based violence. It took 150 years, but there is a strategy now in place to prevent the violence from happening, to provide support for survivors and their families, and to ensure that our justice systems are responsive. We've signed agreements with the Inuit, with First Nations and Métis Nation to identify in a distinction-based their priorities and work together to develop solutions. We've come a long way in 3.5 years, but there is more work ahead. Today, we take another important step on the long road to reconciliation. We honor the families and survivors who, in the face of unimaginable tragedy, have shown tremendous strength, courage, and resilience. I've been truly touched by the stories that you've shared with me, as I'm sure every single one of us who've heard your stories have been. And you've also reminded us that this space is filled with the spirit of loved ones and our stolen sisters, and that this space is also filled with community. A community shaken by tragedy but determined to move forward and heal together. To ensure that your loved ones are never forgotten. To finally end the violence faced by Indigenous women and girls and LGBTQ2 individuals. A community strengthened by the representation of good men like Terry Duguid, like Robert Falcon Willett, and of course by Dan Vandal, who's also here with us today. For too many decades, Indigenous women and girls and LGBTQ2 individuals across Canada have disappeared, have been victims of violence. Our justice system has failed you. Nothing can undo the devastation endured by your families and survivors. but we can find ways to honor our stolen sisters and ensure that they are never forgotten. We do this by listening to those who have survived and those who continue to advocate on behalf of those who did not, by ensuring that non-Indigenous Canadians and settlers on this land know the full history of this country and how to take action that is meaningful towards reconciliation. By taking action together, by working together, we can address these inequities and finally put an end to this national tragedy. Earlier this year, on a really cold February day, a few minutes from here, I announced that the Government of Canada was establishing a commemoration fund to honor the lives and legacies of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls from Métis, Inuit, and First Nation communities from across the country. We did this because families asked for it. We did this because the National Inquiry's interim report had called for a commemoration fund with national and Indigenous organizations, including women's organizations, in partnership with families, Indigenous artists, grassroots advocates who have spearheaded commemoration events and initiatives like this one related to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And so we launched the call in February. We've taken a family-first approach to ensure that families of our stolen sisters are deeply engaged in this process. So that meant that every application had to be accompanied by a letter of support from families. There was positive uptake for this call. There was great interest for these commemorations, and great meaningful ideas came forward. An external Indigenous review committee made up of individuals with meaningful roots in their communities, awareness of crisis, and experience with project funding helped make the determination. And thanks to their profound guidance, I am pleased to announce today that more than 100 projects will receive funding for commemoration initiatives across Canada. This amounts to more than $13 million invested by our governments into these projects, increasing our original $10 million commitment for this initiative. All of these initiatives were designed to remember, memorialize, pay tribute to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, including LGBTQ2 individuals. They range from events that commemorate healing by acknowledging those who were murdered or disappeared by bringing people together to share and support one another, to the creation of items that leave a legacy or educate people about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Here today, we are highlighting 5 of the projects receiving supports, and representatives of these initiatives will join me shortly on this stage to share their ideas. We've all seen powerful examples. I've seen powerful examples. Just recently, hundreds of dresses have been displayed in the windows of the new Directions building on Portage Avenue. Last week, the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center in my own community unveiled their commemoration. And while we've come a long way, there's more work ahead. I'd like to thank and honor the families, survivors, and all those who support them. The Indigenous leaders and teachers, past and present, for their time and tireless efforts and contributions to the development and implementation of commemorations. To those on Treaty 1 territory, including the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Dakota, Dene people, as well as the Métis Nation and Inuit leaders and neighbors here. The team at the Department for Women and Gender Equality, and of course, my colleagues who are standing with me today for their advocacy, for their hard work, and especially for my Parliamentary Secretary Terry Duguid, who's traveled the country to find ways for men and boys to be part of the efforts to prevent and address gender-based violence. And to all those who've created meaningful commemorations. The point of this commemoration fund is to ensure that the stories of our stolen sisters are put in their rightful place in Canada's history so that we may never forget, so that we may move forward on the next chapter of our story together towards healing and prevention. I'd like to now invite Rachel Doughton, the Executive Director of Iqaluit, Michelle Leclerc, Director of Policy and Development from the Central Urban Métis Federation, Sandra Deloranac, Chair of the Board of Manitoba Moon Voices, Coralie McGuire, the Executive Director of the Ontario Native Women's Association, and Ron Rice, the Executive Director of the Victoria Native Friendship Centers, to come join me up here. Please give them a warm welcome. Ron brought his coat. Okay, many thanks, colleagues. This is the part of the announcement where I channel my inner Oprah and talk to people who are doing the good work on the front lines. So can we begin with you? Tell us a little bit about what the investment in the commemoration fund that you have applied for means for the people whom you serve.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Sandra Delaround, and I'm Acting Executive Director of Manitoba Moon Voices. And I think rather than having me say what the project is, and we are grateful for the resources for the project, I invite the visionary, family member, survivor, warrior to come and talk about her project, if you don't mind. Angela Lavallee.
No.
No?
Is Sanjim here? Oh, hi. Did you want to come sit beside me? Sorry, it's just a little bit emotional. I just want to thank grandmothers for the prayers and opening in that beautiful way. Part of the vision had started with a collective of students at U of W. I was in Karen Ridd's nonviolent social action class, and we had to come up, we had to choose an issue in our community and create a nonviolent action around it. So my heart lives with the injustice, with the advocacy around murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited, not only by friends and loved ones, but my granddaughter. As well, my place of healing is running. So I usually run from my place, and then I run down on the Riverwalk. And then in the winter time, for me, it's a reminder of what has been there, what could be there, and that it freezes time for families who have loved ones out there who are missing and could be. So I cry when I run, and in that space, I see people there celebrating family with their children, with their mothers, daughters, sisters, husbands, laughter. And I laugh too. I take my own family there and celebrate, but that part of me, I know what goes on. So with the students and I, we had suggested that we have something in commemorative to remind people that this is going on in Winnipeg, in Canada. And we collaborated with the community because it's always about inclusion and it's about including people. So we had actually didn't know what we wanted to have there. And then, of course, I was sitting with Sandra Delaround one morning, and we were waiting for the Tina Fontaine's to find out the verdict on that. And then we were just sitting and talking to each other, and she was busy, and it come up with the Red Dress Warming Hut. So then we actually moved forward with that, and my classmates and I and the community, we collaborated. We had a nonviolent action at the university, and Bear Clan came out, Bernadette came out, Nahani came out. We had huge supporters, and we were going to begin fundraising. And then I was actually approached by beautiful Manitoba Moon Voices and their women leaders and said, hey, do you have anything planned that we could possibly go for the commemorative fund? And I was like, it's it. So then we didn't have to worry about doing the fundraisers, even though our heart was there. That's our plan. That's what we do. We don't just sit around and wait and sit idle. So part of that is we want to draw in little girls. We want to draw in the young people. We want to draw in families to start having that discussion. If I have to talk to my granddaughter about the possibility of her going missing, you know, the injustice that she goes through, I want people to understand that she has that conversation. I have that conversation. So I think other people should be having that conversation, as well as to be reminded of the beauty, like the water carrier. We want that implemented right in her. The creation of the red dress to be collaborated and built from here, because that's who we are. And to be able to just go and cry too, you know, and to also share what's going on in our community. Drag the Red, Bear Clan initiatives, vigils, like we want a space for that so you can all come. And we don't want it to be in a way where we're taking away from you. We want you to be part of that with us. So that's where it come from. Oh, and Kim McPherson helped me, so.
Before I decided to run for politics, we were at a vigil for our stolen sisters in Peterborough, and I took my 4-year-old niece with me, and she wanted to know why people were so sad and what were we doing standing in that big circle, and I had to explain to her what was happening. And as I got to the end of the story of why we were there, I realized that this can't be how this story ends. I need to be able to tell her, and she needs to be able to tell her daughters, that we did something about those loved ones and we made that story have a better ending. So across the country, parents and aunties are having this conversation, and your project is going to facilitate that conversation and the healing in a very meaningful way. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Greetings from the West Coast. My name is Ron Rice. I'm from Cowichan Tribes on Vancouver Island. I'm the executive director of the Victoria Native Friendship Center. And our project is going to be starting the national tour for an opera that was co-produced by City Opera Vancouver and the Pacific Opera Victoria, called Missing, written by Marie Clements and composed by Brian Current. It was a challenge as a community to decide if this was even the right thing to do. How will our people respond? And when we sat down as a community, we thought about how music and song and dance is how our ancestors communicate with us and how we will communicate with our descendants. And this is the cross point for our two cultures. Opera is the closest we'll be the same. And so we look at art as a tool to create understanding. Unless somebody feels something, they won't understand. You can read all the newspaper articles you want, all the government reports that you want, until you feel something, you won't understand. Whether that feeling is anger or empathy, healing or action, love or loss, you won't understand until you feel something. So we feel that by launching this tour, we can begin to create some understanding in the communities who may not fully understand this, who may not have experienced the loss themselves. We also feel that by having this in such a mainstream role, it helps the families who have experienced loss through violence or through the unknown, that it helps them to understand that more people believe, more people feel, and more people care.
Thank you, Ron.
Miigwech. Greetings from the Ontario Native Women's Association. And our project is Medicine Lines of Womanhood. And the reason we chose this work, it's because we've engaged with families and community members and survivors of violence over the past few years, and we listened to them. You know, last year we engaged with over 3,000 community members and service providers in Ontario to look at the violence and to figure out what's needed, what did they want to see. And they wanted to reclaim their leadership through storytelling. And so the main outcome for our project is focused around healing. And you can't focus on healing until you have safety. And so our project looks at creating woman-centered spaces to begin that healing journey, where women can tell their stories through whatever art form that they choose. We recognized that families told us they had no places for grieving. They had no places where they can begin to move forward in a good way and to reclaim their leadership. And so we listened to everything that they had to say, and we worked with them to create the work that we do. And so one of the other projects that we're currently doing is we created a strategy to address the human trafficking of Indigenous women in Ontario. And one of the outcomes of that strategy that they wanted to see was to reclaim healing and leadership and to begin to move forward in a good way so that we can be whole once again as a community and to unite the communities. And just like my friend here just finished saying, that it's a starting place for a conversation and hopefully healing and reunification once again. One of the reasons people a lot of time will ask us about being a social service nonprofit organization is what's the real impact? Well, last year alone, with 2 projects, we saved the Ontario government $20 million from those 2 on helping women successfully exit human trafficking. So this year, I think the number is already up to 30 women, and we've also helped maybe 300 children go back home to their moms, to their aunties, to their grandmas out of the child welfare system. And so this is the reason why we focus on healing and safety in all the work that we do. And we know that this project here will have those same results, those same outcomes, but more importantly, creating safety so that we're not here having the same conversation in the next 10, 20 years. Miigwech.
Good morning. I'd like to first acknowledge that we're on Treaty 1 territory in the home of the Métis Nation. My name is Michelle Leclerc, and I am originally from Manitoba, St. Lazare, but I live in Saskatoon and I work for Central Urban Métis Federation. We were so fortunate to get this funding. Our project is called Proud, Strong, and Beautiful because that's what we are. So the project is around the ribbon skirt teachings, and we work with women who have been in the social services. I guess they're flagged by social services. They've lost their children to social services, and they're coming out of where they've been. And so we've actually reunited over 1,200 children with their parents. So we work intensively with these women, and this project is going to be part of that. Excuse me, I'm nervous.
You're rocking it.
So from the beginning, our elders tell us, we have an elders council, and they tell us that before our clients or participants can do their skirts, make their skirts, they need to have a name, and they need to have colors. So that will be the beginning of the project, where they're named and they find their color, they find their material. And a huge part of it is grief, loss, and trauma. And as many of you know, as Indigenous people, grief and loss isn't just about, losing someone. It's about losing someone, but it's about losing our language, losing our connectedness to the earth, losing our culture. So that's going to be all part of the project. But yeah, so we're really excited, and I'm really nervous. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend here.
Thank you so much.
morning. My name is Rachel Dutton. I'm the Executive Director of Manitoba Inuit Association. Ikayuktit means Inuit Helping Inuit, and it's a charitable organization that was formed under Manitoba Inuit Association. I want to start by thanking the elders for their prayers and starting us off in a good way. Thank you. Kwanami. I'm not here alone. I'm here with board members of Manitoba Inuit Association, our president, Fred Ford. I'm also here with my staff. They're all standing over there. You can wave. Our project is called the Reda Mauti, and we brought our Reda Mauti here that's joined us here on the stage in commemoration of Inuit women here in Winnipeg and Manitoba. And I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge the Inuk seamstress Gail Gruben. She's from the Inuvialuit region in the Northwest Territories, the western corner of the Northwest Territories. Thank you so much, Gail. And standing beside her is Nikki Kumaksutsiak. She's our Inuit family support worker of our Kativik program. Kativik was brought together under a desperate call from Inuit women here in Manitoba to help lift them up, support them through their journey of missing and murdered Inuit women and girls. And it was through the calls of the women and girls that we work with and their affected families that they come together for sewing circles, which is a very traditional Inuit practice, sewing traditional clothing and other pieces, including the Reda Mauti, which is iconic. It represents Inuit women. It's worn by Inuit women, and the Mauti, it carries their children on their back. So it's very significant. And when we had our sewing circles in Winnipeg, this Mauti was created through the leadership of Gail. And she passed on her talents to the women that we worked with going through the winter. And when we heard the call come out from the Department of Women and Gender Equality, we jumped on that as an opportunity to create space for Inuit. It's been a challenge working in a province that's not the homeland of Inuit. So this is a very, very important project for Inuit that live here in Manitoba, as well as reaching out to the Inuit who live in the Kivalliq region of Nunavut, which is the central part of Nunavut, and it's the piece of Nunavut that we work with most Inuit here in Winnipeg. We're also involving two Inuit communities from Nunatsiavut, which is the northern Labrador region of Canada. And we will also be working with Inuit families in Brandon as well as in Churchill. And so we will be giving them opportunity to come together as Inuit community and their sewing circles where they also have opportunity to create the Reda Mauti. And then we'll be taking those through the guidance of families around Canada to teach other Canadians about the Inuit story of their missing and murdered Inuit women and girls. And we hope to have some temporary and some permanent exhibits that is yet to be determined as we work with the various Inuit communities so that their stories of loss can be heard too from Canadians. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I nearly fell off my chair when I got the call on Thursday morning. We don't ever see resources like this, but for these resources particularly to be placed in the hands of Inuit community and so many Inuit communities is a fantastic opportunity, and we thank you very much for that.
Over the past 3.5 years, our government's invested in grassroots, women's organizations, Indigenous organizations, equality-seeking organizations. because we know the best way to advance gender equality is by investing in the sustainability of the movement that has brought us to this moment in time. I know that the organizations you represent don't always get the recognition, the appreciation for the work that you and your teams do. Know that we are deeply grateful, and for far too long you have been undervalued, undermined, and under-resourced. We are working to change that, and your communities are there to support you as you support them. What do you want people to know about your organization and the people that you work hard to serve each and every day? And I'll begin with you since you have the mic, Rachel.
So Manitoba Inuit Association represents Inuit living in Manitoba. And predominantly the Inuit that live in this province, as I said earlier, are from the Kivalliq region of Nunavut. So it's central to that territory, and it's about geography. And it's about Inuit who are coming down to this city in particular due to medical relocation, due to education relocation, to be closer to their children who have been taken into care, and those children are not with them in Nunavut. They are down here in Winnipeg or other rural communities in Manitoba. It's challenging work because, as I said earlier, we're not standing on traditional Inuit territory here in Manitoba. It's very different doing this kind of work and advocating for Inuit when you're at home in Inuit Nunanga, which is the homeland of the Inuit. So resources at the best of time for probably all of us working in grassroots and Indigenous organizations is scarce. It's certainly been scarce for us. We don't get checks for $500,000. We bounce up and down feeling grateful for, $50,000 and $200,000. It's very, very challenging to be representing a very marginalized group of Indigenous people who have great need, who are overrepresented in child welfare, in our correction system, who are in hospitals receiving care that all of us as Canadians living comfortably in our southern cities and rural communities, we take for granted the kind of health care that we receive. But we see up to 15,000 Inuit here in Winnipeg on an annual basis, just accessing sometimes very basic care, things like dialysis, things like cancer care, who, we as mainstream Canadians can access that locally, and Inuit have to travel for thousands and thousands of miles to access that and are down here alone and not with their families and not having that support. We've got so many Inuit that we are trying to support who are trying to make a better life for themselves, and that means seeking education and post-secondary education, and even coming down here to finish off their grade 10, 11, or 12. So we have a program set up that is helping support those students called our Inuit Education Connections program. But there are so many needs, and we're really struggling to be able to meet those needs. And this commemorative project, I hope, will open doors to other partners and other funders that will finally hear those calls from the Inuit for that assistance. And we are having a grand opening in a couple of weeks. We finally have our own space. The Inuit community have never had their own space in this city. And so we are really happy and thrilled to be able to have our very first office, our very first Inuit Center that'll be on Notre Dame. And we hope to see many of you there. So thank you.
Congratulations.
I'll try and be less nervous. Central Urban Métis Federation is it's a Métis local, but it's a large local in the city of Saskatoon. We represent and advocate for Métis people in the community, but at the same time, what we do is we have a number of apartment buildings throughout the core neighborhood that work with high-risk moms who are trying to get their kids back, high-risk dads that are trying to get their kids back, and they're single dads, and families. And some of these kids come from, they've been in care for a long period of time. We also do emergency receiving homes, so we take kids that have been apprehended by the ministry, and we try and reunite them with their families. We're in the process of opening up a women's health center with an Indigenous doctor named Dr. Alexander King, and she specializes in women's health and most specifically HIV, Hep C, and that sort of thing. So we're in the core neighborhood and we do a lot of that stuff. And our main focus is women. And I wanted to say something that I forgot to say about our project. I forgot to say a lot of things. But what I was going to say about the elders and telling us that our participants need to have a name, because part of the belief is that once you have a name, you can't be lost. So just wanted to say that. But anyway, I want to thank you again for having us and for allowing us to be part of this commemorative fund. Oh,
Thank you.
Well, you have a lot of power in that nervousness. Way to, bring it home there. That was amazing. Indigenous women in Ontario, and typically I find nationally, do a lot of unpaid, unrecognized work. When you're looking at the grassroots movement and you're looking at how we even come to be here today, where, doing the walks, doing the Sisters in Spirit, doing the vigils, and to bring recognition that this was actually happening. And within that space, trying to get, systems to believe you, whether it be the justice system or the child welfare system or the political system. And so, there's been many generations of work from thousands of women that have brought us here today. And, part of ONWA and the work that we do is that we're in 39 communities in Ontario. And the majority of our membership falls within that category of unfunded, unrecognized, unpaid work, because there is no core funding typically for Indigenous women's organizations. And that's where we need to begin to start, because in order to do the work, so that way you're able to focus in on addressing safety and doing that frontline work that's needed right away, where a lot of time and energy is focused in on having the bake sales and looking at fundraising just to keep your doors open, or to be able to fundraise money in order to do an art project and to do healing work and to have ceremony. And so it's great that we're able to include those pieces into the work that we do now. And so our organization last year, majority of the work we do is frontline service delivery, and we helped 10,000 Indigenous women and her families last year alone. And so when looking at that work, it's about, the mom, the dad, the auntie, the grandma, the entire family unit, recognizing that there's an interconnection between everyone in the family to begin doing this work. You can't just heal, the dad without looking at the mom and the children and the entire family unit. And so that's, oops, okay. Don't go anywhere. You're next. You okay? Yes. Okay. Yeah. And so, being an Indigenous women's organization as well, I always find we try to save the world overnight. As I would find with majority of Indigenous organizations, that being, under-resourced in order to do everything, right? You have to, you have a family life, but at the same time you're working 24/7, got to be on call, dealing with crisis, dealing with capacity and core.
Can someone call a doc? No? He's diabetic, and there's some juice here.